Thank you.
Okay, we're
All
about
right.
to start with the 6 constitutional amendments and the wrong screen share. There we go. Everybody sees that now where we're at the constitutional amendments. Okay. Men were accepted in 1974, and we have men both in our board in Manatee County as well as the Florida board. 20% of the membership is men. We research, we educate, and we advocate. This is an educational one, so we are going to go over the pros and cons. We encourage everybody to make up their mind whether they think the pro or the con is more persuasive to them, because a number of them have, positive and negatives, and it just depends on where you fall on that. So this is educational. We're nonpartisan and nonprofit political organization. That we are political. Some people will say, oh, you're just political. Yeah, well, we are. But we never, ever have supported a candidate or a party. Okay, as far as voters' information, on our website, lwvmanatee.org, if you go to voters kit and election information, there's a bunch of information there. You click on that where the arrow is and the drop-down box comes up. And you not only, this is old, there's more stuff there now, but in particular, you'll notice there's in there, there's what you won't get in the paper guide is you won't get judges and you won't get retention judges. You won't get mosquito and fire. You will get mosquito and fire and judges that are up for election. And vote 411.org, which is a slick electronic system that does more than just the election candidates side by side. But what's really nice about this is it's countrywide. So everybody can put in their address and see what their ballot looks like and get the information that their candidates have submitted. So that bright gold arrow going across the top there, if you click on find your ballot, put in your address and say whether you want it in Spanish or English, you will get your ballot with the responses by the candidates. Okay, and as I said, it does more. You can go in there to register to vote, to check your voting status, a lot of other stuff that's there. All right, Florida elections. We vote every 2 years, so thankfully we'll have a year off this next year. And Florida does have term limits for the governor and state legislatures. The Florida legislature meets only 60 days a year, and then they come back and they tell us what they've done, or they ask beforehand what's high priorities. Florida's constitution is not like the federal constitution. The federal constitution, if it says 19th Amendment gives women the right to vote, so that's always the 19th Amendment. But on Florida, they somebody's could you mute? Yeah, they integrate the wording into the Constitution so that Amendment 4 last time was whether ex-felons could vote. Amendment 4 this time is whether or not a citizen's initiative has to pass twice. So that the amendment number really is not what follows after the fact. And it does require 60% vote to have a citizen's initiative, have a constitutional amendment pass. So let's hit the constitutional amendments. Amendment 1 is just one word. It just takes the word every citizen of the United States that is a resident of Florida is entitled to vote, and it changes it to only. it has no functional difference at all. The opposing, well, the supporting organizations say that the reason for it is that it.
I'm gonna be watching. Oh, get out of there.
Okay, somebody needs to mute. Harriet, could you please mute? It says, bottom left, thank you. That they want to ensure that elections are preserved to committed citizens of the United States, and non-citizens are prevented from voting now and in the future. The critics say that there are incredibly few instances of non-citizens purposely voting. There was a 2012 investigation by the state of Florida where they pulled 180,000 names out of 13 million. And it was done by the Secretary of State and the election officials. That came up with 85 names of people that really weren't eligible to vote that voted. And it doesn't even say whether they were non-citizens, the reason for ineligibility. So a vote yes would replace the word every with only. The US Constitution already requires that only American citizens can vote. And a vote no would leave the language the same. Amendment 2 is a gradual increase in the state minimum wage. Now, right now, the minimum wage is $8.50 an hour. That amounts to $17,800 a year. This amendment would, on September 30th, 2021, increase the minimum wage from the $8.50 to $10 an hour. Then annually, so in 2022 on September 30th, it would go up another dollar and then another dollar till it reaches $15 an hour on September 30th, 2026. And after that, it would be adjusted annually by inflation. Number of large companies already are paying $15 an hour. That includes McDonald's, Target, Amazon, Walt Disney, and Costco. Today's low wage earners, minimum wage earners, earn less per hour than the effective wage of minimum wage 50 years ago. And productivity has increased dramatically over the last 50 years. And affluence, the economy as a whole. The Bureau of Labor Statistics say that minimum wage workers tend to be 25 and under, female and people of color. The Florida Division of Elections estimates that the higher minimum wage would cost the governments of Florida, that's all the governments of Florida, $16 million during the first year to implement. And then by 2027, they would be paying $540 million over today's current minimum wage worker or low wage worker. Opponents say increasing the minimum wage would lead to general price hike. They also say it would lead to job cuts, reducing hours for employees, and that many small businesses might not be able to afford it and might be forced to close. Supporters say studies show that increased minimum wage has little to no detrimental effect on job growth, that the current minimum wage of $8.50 an hour is not enough money for a person to live on and should be raised over time, that having a higher base wage lowers employee turnover, basically the tipped wage is tagged to the minimum wage at $3.02 less an hour. So that would increase with it. However, there would be, the state government would do legislation for implementation and might change that. So a vote yes would incrementally increase the wage over time and raise many of the low wage workers out of poverty level. It would help reduce race and gender income inequality. It would potentially increase economic activity because of increased household spending. That is, I'm earning more, so therefore I'm spending more. It would require all businesses to budget for increased payroll taxes that do have lower wage employees. It would have little to no detrimental effect on job growth, partly due to the higher demand for goods and services generated by higher wage earners, lower employee turnover. A vote no would allow businesses to keep labor costs at current levels. It would avoid potential labor cost impacts on the prices of consumer goods. It would maintain low-paying positions for teenagers and young adults just entering the labor market. And it would likely continue to lead to a wage structure that leads to poverty among younger workers, women, and minorities. Amendment 3, all voters vote in primary elections for state legislature, governor, and cabinet. We've had a question about why this only applies to state, and the constitutional amendments that are done by citizens or by the state legislature that go on the ballot have to have one subject. So in order to get it approved, they chose what they felt would be the most effective. This amendment replaces the current system, currently a closed system. That is, in the primary, only Republicans can vote for Republican candidates, and only Democrats can vote for Democratic candidates, and no party affiliates and minor party ones cannot vote in those races. It would replace that with a single nonpartisan primary. Then whatever candidates, the two top candidates would then go on to the general election as sort of a runoff. So effectively, all voters would be able to vote in the primary election, and they would be able to vote on all candidates. It wouldn't matter if the candidate was Republican, Democrat, Green Party, Tea Party, all voters could vote on all candidates. Currently, Florida is one of 9 states that has a closed primary system, and having the winner advance to the primary. There are a number of forms of open primaries, and top 2, which is what this is called, it's also sometimes called a jungle primary or a blanket primary, is one of the types of open primaries. This applies to the governor, our state senators, our state representatives, and the elected cabinet positions, which are Attorney General, Chief Financial Officer, and Commission of Agriculture. So the appointed ones, it stays the same. This does not require the party to be on the ballot. They could choose to or not choose to, but again, there would be enacting legislation done by our state legislature. And it is pretty sure that they would add that requirement to it. If there are only 2 candidates for a party, but they're the same party, like 2 Republicans or 2 Democrats, then that election gets moved to the general election. So there are over 3.8 million no party and minor party voters that can't vote in the primary. That's out of 13.9. So that's 27% of the voters in Florida cannot vote in a closed primary system. So they only go to the general election, or they're not affiliated with the Republicans or the Democrats. By far, the bulk of these are millennials and youngers. And so that trend is increasing. We would, if you look, it's unmistakable over time how quickly this no party affiliation is growing. The two states that have exactly this system are Washington and California, that use the top two primary system. There are two other states that have a different type of top two. That would be Louisiana and Nebraska. The financial impact of this is difficult to determine. So supporters say, supporting organizations, and there's two, there's All Voters Vote, which is the sponsor. You will hear people say that it was funded by a Miami billionaire who was Republican, that's now no party affiliation, but there are people of both parties. And we have a wonderful video on our website where there's pros and cons, the Democratic state chair, Republican state chair, and two of the supporters. The supporters say that closed primaries lead to hyperpartisanship, and that open primaries would lead to provide voters with the broadest slate of diverse candidates. It would attract more moderate candidates, and it would increase voter participation. It would discourage candidates from catering to the base of their party. So if I have to appeal to everybody that's on the ballot in the primary, then if I'm Republican, I'm not going to appeal to the more extreme parts of my party. And if I'm Democrat, I'm not going to appeal to the more part, because I have to appeal to the general broad public as opposed to just winning in the primary. Opponents say, move forward here. Opponents say that the amendment would undo a system set up to prevent political corruption and closed door deal making. So are they going to get together and try to narrow the field or make a deal on who's going to run? The top two primaries, they also say that the top two primaries would make it much harder for non-white candidates and minor party candidates to win legislative races. So if I narrow my field, it's easier for me to get the minor groups to forward. They say with the current makeup of the legislative districts, passage of this amendment would likely lead to reduction in the candidates from minority communities and less attention paid to more minority communities. So a vote yes would establish a type 2 primary system for the election of the state senators, governor, and cabinet. It would help increase voter participation by allowing 3.8 million of Florida's 13.9 million registered voters not affiliated with a major party to vote in primaries for the state legislature, cabinet, and governor. It could potentially lead to fewer minority candidates being elected to serve or represent in the Florida legislature. It could potentially result in two candidates from the same political party running against one another in the same race in the general election. I believe I heard that 6% of the races in Washington state end up with two party of the same candidate going to the top. So I think that's probably a likely scenario that will occasionally happen. It potentially may produce more competitive state races and attract more moderate candidates to run for state offices. It would require third-party candidates, such as the Green Party or the Tea Party or the Libertarians, to run in the primary as opposed to the general election ballot. It would no longer enable unqualified write-in candidates to trigger a closed primary simply by entering the race for a state office. So we saw that very well in Manatee, where we had races where there were only Republican candidates, and so all somebody has to do is go in, fill out a piece of paper that they want to be a write-in candidate. And then that candidate that won in the primary is on the general election ballot with a line to write in the other candidate's name. But there's no intention of that write-in candidate to run or participate. They just want to close it to anyone else besides people in their party, even though that person is going to represent everybody. A vote no would continue the current closed primary election process for electing state senators, the state legislature, cabinet, and governor, primarily maintaining two-party control over the state government. It would require that if a non-affiliated or minor party person wanted to vote in the primary, they would have to register with a major party, which we have a great deal of difficulty getting them to do. And it would ensure that, that the nominated candidates would reflect the positions of their political parties, particularly. It would also continue to allow unqualified candidates to close an election. Amendment 4. Amendment 4 is, so these are all, the first 4 amendments are citizen initiative amendments. Right now, we have, in order for us to get a citizens initiative amendment on the ballot, there's a very expensive and very restrictive process, harder than most any states to do it. But this would require that the citizens initiative not only has to pass this time, but the next general election, it has to pass again. So, and by 60%. So let's move forward here. So this reflects the change in process. In 2006, in an effort to slow down the citizens initiative process, the legislature put the requirement, changed it from 50% to 60%. Then last, the legislature went and put an incredibly high bar, almost impossible to get beyond, where before this last year's legislation, you had to have 10% of a congressional district that voted in the last primary election in that congressional district sign a petition that they wanted this on the ballot, and you had to do it in the 1/8 of the congressional districts. You also had to do it, so you also could pay somebody by the petition. So you never got anything in without paid petition takers. Last year, they moved that 10% from 10% to 25%. And they moved it from the 1/8 of the legislative districts to all of them. And on the, if you look at the Amendment 8 video, you will see Joe Gruder say absolutely that they need to shut down the citizens initiative process or Amendment 3 not being able to make the ballot. So it's clearly an attempt to totally drive a stake through the heart of citizens' initiatives. And these are usually brought up. This is not unique to Florida, but there are a few other states that this happened. This usually is brought up when one passes that the legislature particularly doesn't like an Amendment 4 that granted the right to citizens that have had felonies but have fulfilled their terms and their terms of their sentence, including parole. Clearly, the legislature did not want that, so they this is probably the impetus that brought this to the fore. The supporters say, which we just have, the two organizations, and the Chamber of Commerce didn't say why. The supporters say, all we have is the attorney for the initiative and said, by doing it twice, we think it will reduce the amount of whimsical amendments. The opposers say you are adding a burden to the already expensive and difficult process for citizens to exercise their right to decide what they want in the Constitution through direct democracy. They also say this provides a second go-round for well-funded corporate interests or political interests to go after a popular citizens initiative. So a vote yes would require that every citizens initiative would have to pass twice in 2 general elections, 60%. It would lead to an even further reduction in the number of future amendments to make the Constitution. It would delay enactment of popular initiatives for another 2 years. It would add considerable time and money to pass an initiative. It would allow well-funded corporate interests or political interests to defeat popular citizens initiatives. It would eliminate the ability to, virtually eliminate the ability for citizens to bring up popular ones that the legislature will not bring up. A vote no would keep it where one passage at 60% by the citizens of the state would enact that constitutional amendment into the Florida Constitution. Amendment 5 and Amendment 6 are both tax legislation. So you're going to see the same reasons that by the opposing organization. The Amendment 5 relates to the Save Our Homes portability. So that if you are a Florida resident and you have a homestead exemption, every year your assessed value, that you assessed your real estate taxes cannot go up more than 3%. But when you sell your house, you have 2 years to get another house and roll that reduction in your assessed value over to the new home. However, it's a calendar year. So if I sell my home on December 31st, I really only effectively have 1 year to roll it over. And so this extends it for another year, so that if somebody is selling it late in the year, they can keep that reduced property tax by buying within effectively 2 years and a day, or 2 to 3 years, depending on when you sell your home. The supporters say this is just allowing more time for someone to roll it over. The opponents say, number one, taxes don't belong in the Constitution, that this is the job of the legislatures. And part of the reason they should, number one, do their job. Number two, putting tax legislation in the amendment decreases your flexibility to assess for changing economic positions, so that it's so that if you have changing economics, it's a long process to wait until the next general election, put it on the ballot, get it approved, where you really want more flexibility in tax legislation. And the other thing is it preempts home rule. So your real estate taxes are really a local issue, and this is taking over and putting something in on the state level that's really a local issue. So a vote yes would help homeowners that sell late in the year, giving them more time to transfer. It would reduce property taxes for local funders and schools somewhat. It limits the ability of local governments to control their own tax legislation. And it would add tax law to the Constitution, and a vote, would keep it the same, all the taxes. It would leave tax legislation out of the Constitution. Amendment 6 is another tax legislation, and this one's, there have been 3 reductions in veterans' taxes, and when that, so they're real estate taxes. So when that veteran dies, and this is for permanent combat-related disabilities, that real estate tax reduction ends for the spouse. So what this legislation does is it says, well, as long as that spouse is alive, and they don't remarry, they don't sell the property, they don't dispose of the property, they will continue to have that real estate reduction as if that the permanently combat-related veteran is still alive. And these same reasons apply for the opposing and the supporting organizations. It's basically, it's a tax law issue. I'm not going to repeat it. And a local issue. Where do you put it? So, so a vote yes allows the surviving spouse to keep it, and a vote no keeps things as they are. All right, let's go to, let me quick say, if somebody wants to go off mute and have any questions on the back, what I've gone over so far, then I'm going to go over to the Manatee Court, and then I'm going to Manatee land and water referendum very quickly. And then I'm going to talk about our coming attractions. So anybody have a question? Okie dokie. We'll have questions at the end too. The Manatee County land referendum. This does exactly what it says. It's to conserve lands. We know land is disappearing quickly. We also know that from all the way from Lee County to Citrus County, all the other counties have had this type of funding. So this funding is when the average homeowner is $29 a year. So this allows not only funds to be accumulated, but it also allows the county to go out and get a bond. So we've got a really prime piece of property, either for water protection, for parks, for something like Robinson or the Braden River Preserve, where it's going to protect the water quality, it's going to protect habitat for fish or animals that will be picked up for development if we can't gather that right now and say we can get a bond and it will be funded with this this tax increase of, for the average homeowner, $29 a year. So Mary Lynn Parker, our education chair, says You can go to Robinson, you can go to the movies with your family for $29 a year, one night, or you can go to Robinson every day. So this is, protects our drinking water, protects habitat. So it does make them, as we say, once it's gone, it's gone. We could find no organization that opposed it and many that are for it, including the League of Women Voters of Manatee County. We did have a presentation in September, so I'm going to do this quickly. Coming attractions, Thursday. We really have a wonderful program called the Taste of the League, which a chair each time talks about what they do, but we also have little bits of, we have a toast, so you bring a drink, you have little bits. This is it's not only for new members, it's also for a general meeting for existing members, and it's also a meeting for prospective members. And there's one this Thursday, which is on the right corner there, saying advocating for a quality program, the League of Women Voters. That's Thursday. The next hot topics, the second Monday in November, is going to be innovative solutions to attainable housing. So this is not going to be what we're doing right now in Manatee County. What are some of those things out there that we're not doing right now that would be, we could bring here and work on it? We already have the redevelop, Jerry Lopez, who's in charge, female, in charge of redevelopment. We already have a land fund that has tried in Manatee County a couple of things that didn't quite gel, where that he's going to be on, and we've got another one, the zero homelessness one that's being done. It's a new thing. So that's coming up. We also have a election night slumber party. So at 9 and 10 and 11, we all get on, and one of our members, Holly Lutz, will sort of say where we are. We'll talk about what's going on in the election. Either Carolyn or I will talk about some of the local races and what's happening. And the preferred attire is pajamas. So, and then we also have not scheduled it yet, but the week after the election, we're just going to have a celebration for everybody that worked so hard on this campaign. So everybody can go off mute and say anything questions, comments, anything at this point, because that's the end of my presentation. All righty.
It's very good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everyone. And hopefully we'll see you either on today's forum or tomorrow's forum or at Thursdays.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for this informative presentation.
Thank you.